Fabulous. So, thank you everybody for joining me today for the Become an Expert session. We host sessions like this quite frequently. What we're trying to do is really upskill and pass on knowledge to yourselves as sector leaders and people that will be working with or supporting different organizations, maybe clubs, different organizations or groups that are looking to essentially raise funds to be able to either deliver projects or to be able to sustain what they're already doing. And obviously they're looking to people like yourselves for maybe a bit of guidance and a bit of signposting in the right direction. So throughout today's session, we are going to be looking at how you can do that effectively, giving you a bit of background knowledge of Crowdfunder, so Crowdfunder UK, which is who I am here representing. So I'm Zoe, the community manager for Crowdfunder UK, and it's my job to help different projects be able to access not only the platform effectively, so Crowdfunder, but also some of that match funding that we have as part of our offer. And we'll look in a bit more detail about that later on in the session. We'll focus a bit of our time on the Movement Fund, which is a wonderful funding opportunity from Sport England, but we'll also highlight some of our other partners as well that could be a good fit for some of the eligible projects that you may well be supporting. We have allowed 90 minutes for this session, and that does include Q&As, that does include some tasks that I'll be setting you as well. If you do want to ask any questions, please pop something into the chat box. I will keep an eye on that throughout the whole session. If you'd rather ask something on screen, on camera, that's absolutely fine. Maybe just pop a little message into the chat and then I can have a conversation with you on screen. We are recording this session. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending that out as part of a follow-up email with links to the resources that we discuss, and again, helping you to be able to share what you've learned today with those clubs and organisations that you'll be supporting. If you find you have any issues with your internet connection, the best thing to do is just to drop off the call and follow the kind of joining link to bring you straight back into the live room. You will unfortunately lose any chat that's been happening prior in the chat box. So please let me know and I can always bring you back up to speed if there's something that you've missed. If you do, if you don't want to feature in the recording, by all means, you can keep your camera off. What I would like to do is when we have our breakout rooms, we're doing our tasks and we regroup, I'll stop the recordings at that point so that we can have some kind of in-person virtual conversations, and I won't record those. So if you don't want to feature on camera, but you would like to be a part of those, then please just pop your camera on at that point. If you could keep your microphone muted throughout the session, that will just limit background noise. And then, of course, if you are struggling to see the full slide, the best thing to do is just select side-by-side speaker view, which you should find at the top right of your screen, and that will remove any of our videos, so our cameras away from the slide, and you should be able to see the full content. So why would clubs or organisations be thinking about using Crowdfunder UK or thinking about crowdfunding as a way to raise funds? Well, we all know in this call, and we all have an understanding of just the importance of making sure that different organisations are actually diversifying their income streams. There will, of course, be other ways of fundraising that clubs and organisations may be familiar with. So that might be grant applications, that could be in-person fundraising, that could be sponsorship from local businesses that they rely on kind of year in, year out. We know as well, as I'm sure you all do, that actually that landscape of funding is pretty competitive at the moment. There's been quite a large amount of kind of grassroots level cuts to kind of public funding in some areas. We know that some organisations and some clubs are struggling more than they have done in previous years. And so it's really important that organisations are thinking about different ways that they can be bringing in income, whether that be in trading income, whether that be increasing memberships, for example, and also it could be things like match funding or crowdfunding. So we're going to look at how our platform, so the Crowdfunder UK platform, can fit into those diversified income streams. Some of the reasons why it's important for those organizations to be thinking that way is it will long term increase that financial stability of the club. You know, not having all of your eggs in one basket when it comes to your kind of income streams and your finances is only going to help you be sustainable going forward. And that's, of course, going to reduce some of that financial risk to the organization. In terms of for your donors as well, or your supporters, as we like to call them, it can actually strengthen that engagement with things like crowdfunding, which is a very public-facing way of raising funds. It's a great way to strengthen those relationships and actually create kind of lasting positive relationships with a community and a supporter base. And that can be for organizations and clubs that will then be able to build upon that network going forward. So it can be something that can start off relatively small and grow over time, because you can always come back and use the different functionalities or come back time and time again and crowdfund, receive match funding, or potentially run a prize draw, which we'll talk about a bit later, in order to really elevate the fundraising activity throughout the year. So, for those of you on the call who are thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but who are you? What do you do? I've never heard of you. Crowdfunder UK was set up around 14 years ago now. We're based primarily in the Southwest. So we have a head office here in Cornwall. We also have another head office over at Bridport, but we do have staff, remote staff that are dotted around the UK. It was set up by a very passionate but very small group of individuals who had an idea to essentially set up a platform to enable communities and individuals, businesses, organizations to tackle society's biggest challenges by making ideas happen. So when you look at our platform, you will see that the most successful projects are the ones that are having some kind of positive impact, whether that's a business that have a kind of a social conscience and are doing wonderful things from a business level, whether that's a community group, whether that's an individual, a charity, or in this case, it could be a social enterprise, it could be a cask, it could be all sorts of different ways that sports clubs or sports organizations, physical activity focused organizations are set up. So far in that time, we have seen over 5 million, oh, where are we? 5 million supporters, or our crowd, if you like, is more than 5 million individuals. So, along with our partners, so our match funding partners that we'll look at later, have donated and pledged more than 420 million pounds to over 100,000 projects. So, although we're a small UK-based company, the impact that we've been able to have is actually pretty massive, and it's only growing. And this is why we're so excited to share the capabilities with yourselves, because actually we see really good success rates with projects that are coming through the platform. And because we are a small team of people, we're very passionate about supporting others to achieve their fundraising objectives and their fundraising goals. Okay, let's have a quick look in the chat box before we move on to those different ways that you could utilize the platform. Fabulous. We've had a couple of questions about recording the session. Absolutely. This whole session will be recorded and that will be sent out in a follow-up email with links to the resources that we talked through. So you will have essentially a package of resource for you to look back on and some information that you can share with those that you're looking to support as well. Okay, fab. Do keep any other questions coming through. But for now, let's have a quick look at the different ways that you could use our platform, so Crowdfunding UK. And there's a few things on here that you will notice are very similar to other kind of online fundraising platforms that yourselves or those that you kind of work with within your network may well be familiar with. So crowdfunding itself is the process of going out to your community and raising money. It's as straightforward as that. Doing that digitally with the different platforms that are out there is something that lots of sports clubs and organizations are already embracing and have done for quite a while. Things like running, individual fundraisers on behalf of maybe a charity or the club doing that. Or it could be that actually they're using one of the other platforms to raise much needed funds for project delivery, or maybe in a crisis, if something's happened, and they need to do repairs or maintenance to clubhouses, all those types of things. That is all possible on the Crowdfunder UK website as well on our platform. There are a few things that are unique to us, which we know works really, really, really well for the sports sector or the physical activity sector. And that's things like accessing that match funding. So by running a crowdfunding campaign, so essentially you're setting up that forward-facing or public-facing campaign page, which highlights all of the wonderful things that the club or organization is doing, the financial needs, so why they're raising the funds, and the outcomes that that might achieve. It's very much a shop window into the organization, celebrating all of the community impact and the great things that that organization is doing. By putting that information into our platform, into our system, eligible projects will be matchmaked, if you like, so a bit like a dating service for projects and partners, and they will be matched with some of our match funding partners who they can apply to receive money from. And we'll look at the mechanics of this a little bit later on. But if they are eligible and if their project aims fit the needs of the fund, they could receive a match funding pledge from one of our partners. They could receive match funding pledges from a multitude of our different partners. So actually, it's an incredible way to potentially boost their fundraising potential. We know that projects that are receiving match funding overall will raise more because actually the crowd gives more. So supporters give more, knowing that their funds or their donations are going to be matched. And obviously that maximizes the whole fundraising effort. There's prize draws. That's something which is different to some other platforms out there, which is essentially allowing project owners or organizations to set up a very straightforward online prize draw. Things like terms and conditions are already embedded within the template of doing that, so they can just amend and adjust those to fit their needs. Those terms and conditions are in line with the kind of gambling guidance in the UK, making sure that everything is above board. And those prize draws and any campaign, in terms of how long organisations are running them for, can be completely determined by the club or the organisation's needs. So it might be that actually they decide at this time of year they're going to run a Christmas prize draw because they've got a brilliant event coming up, and maybe the prize is some exclusive tickets to that particular event or an experience, or maybe it's something that would make a really good Christmas present. If the prize is going to resonate with their potential audience and their potential supporters, they might run that for a week. They might run it for, a couple of weeks and actually then draw down the funds within 5 to 7 days of that closing. So actually, it's a really, really quick way to raise money in an exciting and engaging way. And then same with those crowdfunding campaigns, they can run for as long or as short as the organization needs them to. So it's a very accessible way to raise money in a finite amount of time, unlike maybe traditional grants where maybe there's a round of a round of funding, and actually then they're waiting for kind of months for a decision, and then maybe there's a little bit longer for the payout, which is absolutely fine and has its place. However, crowdfunding in this way can maybe become part of that overall strategy. So it can kind of fill in the gaps where there might be a bit of a financial need, or actually just keeping that sustainability going throughout the year. Another really exciting thing, which is great for this sector, is the ability for individuals to fundraise on behalf of the organisation or on behalf of the project. So again, the sporting sector or physical activity sector has potentially the capacity to be offering some exciting fundraising opportunities, whether that's something actually at their venue, and it could be pitting different teams against one another. It could be bringing the community into that and having a fundraising day. Could be going out to local schools and local educational venues, maybe doing things like, bake sales, non-uniform days, maybe sending some coaches in and doing actually some planned activity with them as part of a fundraising day. So there's lots of opportunity and lots of ways in which the platform can be used to best suit the individual organizations. And of course, you can receive things like regular donations, much like some of the other platforms out there. Are there any questions on the ways in which you can actually utilize the platform before I move on to some of the benefits? I will scroll through the gallery as well and see if there's anybody with a hand up. There's lots of cameras off, which I completely understand. However, if you would like to ask a question, just give me a nod and pop something in the chat. Okay, so of course, the primary focus for any organization looking to fundraise is that they have a fundraising need. They need the money to be able to deliver on what they are saying they're going to do project-wise, or they have that kind of emergency relief or repairs, maintenance, whatever it might be. That is going to be the primary focus. What's exciting about crowdfunding as a means to do that is some of those additional benefits that come alongside doing the fundraising in this public facing way, rather than some of the more traditional forms of fundraising. So it's a great way for clubs and organisations to build confidence in their ideas. And you'll soon see when you're running a crowdfunding campaign whether there is an appetite for either the project delivery or what you're trying to raise money for, to see if there's an appetite with the crowd. The feedback that project owners will get, the comments that are left on the page, just the community funding the project itself is huge amounts of validation. By putting the message out there about the project need, the fundraising, the actual organization itself, it can really help to build awareness around the club or the organization and get people excited about the upcoming project delivery. What we've noticed from kind of anecdotal feedback when I've sat and talked with projects and we've had them on as guest speakers and things on our webinars, which are for our project owners, where we walk them through how to do this successfully, is we've had organizations that say, well, we are a social enterprise, but actually the feedback we got from our community is that they didn't realize that. They thought that we were a company. Is there's a surf school that I had on. They thought that we had no financial issues, that we were completely kind of self-sustainable, that we were essentially a money-making for-profit organization. And actually, when they put their message out there on this kind of crowdfunding page, which is your chance and your opportunity to really share everything with your community, the feedback they got was, had we realized, we would have been able to support earlier, or maybe we could have volunteered to help. So some really positive feedback, and it was quite eye-opening for them to get more of an understanding as to how their club was viewed in their local community. And I think building those connections outside of the core audience, so outside of existing members or existing beneficiaries, can be really, really useful. People that support a campaign will automatically become advocates. They will start talking about the campaign, the club, the organisation, the project, and that can build some really lovely connections going forward. Again, we've had in the past local businesses who, once they've seen that actually I think it was a rugby club, they were crowdfunding a local trades shop. I think it might have been Howdens or something along those lines, had seen the crowdfunder. They put out a press release, it was in the local paper, that she contacted the club and said, we didn't realise that this was the case. We can't unfortunately support you financially, but we've got some ex-display kitchens that we'd be more than happy to donate one for the clubhouse kitchen, and we can come and fit it for you. That conversation would not have happened unless that particular shop or supplier, if you like, had heard about the crowdfunder through the promotion that they were doing. If they had just applied for funds in the traditional way, then actually that conversation would never have happened. That gifting of that display kitchen wouldn't have happened. And actually, they've now got a really strong relationship with that particular supplier, who I think have gone on to actually sponsor them and have some signage put up around the club as well. So having those advocates and organically growing a network is a great thing to have off the back of a campaign. And there'll be some new skills, no doubt, that project owners will learn. It can feel quite out of people's comfort zone, and we completely understand that. So we've got loads of resources to help them and yourselves as those kind of mentors or, those ones that will share knowledge with them. And we can support them every step of the way. And of course, accessing that match funding as well, which we'll look at in a bit more detail. So just to give you a few examples then, what we're seeing with different clubs, different organisations, is that real connection with their community. We are real champions of kind of collaboration and bringing your community along with you for this fundraising journey because we know how amazing those additional benefits can be for the longevity of a club or an organisation. So there's just a few examples that I've pulled out here. So with the Birtley swimming pool, they actually received £8,000 from Sport England extra funding and raised 15 or 15 and a half, almost £1,000. So that's £8,000 from Sport England, and then the rest has been raised by the crowd. And you'll see here that they had 423 supporters. So that's 423 individuals in their community backing their project. And I wonder how many of those are members or people who kind of take part in activity there, and how many of those are members of the community who are actually getting behind them now that they know the need of the pool, which isn't necessarily always the case. I mentioned also about the ability to receive funding from a few of our different partners. So you'll see here that we've got Bridport Youth Club, who actually received pledges from not only Sport England, but Palmer's Brewery and also the Rotary Club, two partners that were working specifically in their area. And also the Eastbourne Boxing Club. So they receive money from the East Sussex Council as well as Sport England. So we do work with local authorities as well as some of our corporate partners and some of our national organisations as well. And projects can receive more than one pledge. So again, being able to group that all together in essentially one place, so although you're doing applications for each of those funds, they are very, very stripped back. They're not as lengthy as some of the grant applications that you might find out there that might support clubs and organisations. Our partners will be looking at the information on the application forms, which is quite straightforward, very much kind of organizational structure, making sure that they have the right amount of unrelated trustees or directors, those types of things, and then really that the kind of impact that they're hoping to have, how much money they're wanting to raise, and how that will be spent, and how that obviously fits in with the funding that they're offering. But they'll also have access to the project page, and this is where the clubs or organizations can really go to town and actually talk about all of the wonderful things that they're already doing and hope to achieve if they raise the money. So it's, as I say, it's that shop window into the organization. And those two things combined can make a really, really strong impression with our funding partners. Okay, we're going to stop there for a few moments. Okay, thank you, everybody. So, what I would like to hear from you all is, have you experienced any feedback or do you have any kind of preconceptions of what barriers there might be to crowdfunding? So, in terms of the amount of work it might be, in terms of things that you've heard from different organizations that you're working with as to why they might not have decided to crowdfund. So does anyone feel brave enough to let me know either your own opinion or something that you might have heard from your sector as to why crowdfunding wouldn't work for them? Rob, let's come to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the only barrier personally for me would be the fact that I've heard of it but didn't really know what it was for. And so for me, it's just lack of knowledge.
Okay, fab. That's good to know. So we can not debunk that because it's not really a myth, but we can have a look at that and we can look at the different resources that are out there for you and things that you'd be able to share them with us and say, well, actually, let me signpost you over here where there is this different information that will help you and get you started. Anybody else? resources. So relying on volunteers to drive the project, social media expertise. We've got some people have flagged use of digital platforms, potentially reliance on online promotion. Yes, I completely understand that. And that does come up time and time again. And actually, with being a digital fundraising platform, there is, of course, that assumption that it's all got to be done via social media platforms. It's all got to be done kind of digitally, and you're just sharing all of this on the internet. It has its place, absolutely. But so does in-person conversations. So do fundraising events. So does, actually speaking to people and driving people to the platform that way. Yes, it's really beneficial if all of the donations are made digitally to the actual page. That is really great for kind of ramping up supporter numbers and making sure that you're hitting any milestones you might need to release any match funding, because some of them have requirements such as having a certain amount of supporters that have donated. However, what we do see as well is people having in-person fundraising events, raising kind of a chunk of money and then actually paying that onto the crowdfunder and being able to showcase it in that way as well. The other thing with the social media element and the kind of promoting online element is, again, it can be daunting. But I would say in the world in which we live in at the moment, most organizations have some kind of social footprint. They have some kind of account that they are using in order to promote their own activities, whether that is events that are coming up, whether that's fixtures, whether that's, impact that they're already having. And actually, flipping the kind of concern on its head, it's an opportunity to build upon that and actually grow that online presence and grow that online audience. And that will have longevity for the club or for the organization going forward. So it doesn't have to be a scary process. And also, we're going to look at this. So, understanding audience, we're going to look at that a little bit further and the different ways you can promote and communicate. But the one thing I will say is, there are so many networks out there that already exist that actually having a relatively small social media following of your own doesn't have to be a barrier. There are ways in which you can kind of piggyback into other networks, whether that's geographically, whether that's within the same sector, whether that's with linking with your NGB or your active partner or your local authority to get them spreading the word online as well. And that again will help you to build your following organically. We've got so videography skills. Thank you, Becky. Yes, so having a video or feeling like you need to have these really produced and professionally filmed videos and things like that on your page. We've got some great stats on that and actually kind of debunking that myth in a moment. Um, so creative content, making it relevant, being able to sell the outcome of the project and impact the community, club and organization. Absolutely. So sometimes that process of actually putting things forward facing and having images and having that kind of content which spans those different narratives, again, that can feel daunting. And actually, we've got loads of resources to help people to do that effectively. So what we'll look at now, if I share my screen again, what we'll look at now is some of those myths and actually done a little bit of data around them. And it's really interesting. Even for us, it's been a really interesting exercise to actually see what we know anecdotally and then actually what the numbers are telling us. So let's share this one. So our first one is, this is all data taken from last year. So this is across all of the projects that crowdfunded kind of year to date, essentially. So we're not just looking at the sport and physical activity sector. We're looking at every kind of walk of life project that's come onto the platform. So we need to have a video to go live. Actually, around 80% of projects go live without a video. We do know, though, that the ones that have videos raise more. And the reason for that is we talked about showcasing personality. We talked about transparency. We talked about honesty. We talked about, shop windows into the organization. Actually, so much of that can be captured in a very short video. We get people that are concerned about the quality of that video. They're concerned about, not having the resources to be able to do that. If we have bowls clubs that are one of our most successful brackets of crowdfunding for physical activity. I've just been doing some numbers for the Bowls Association, and actually, as part of the Movement Fund, they're probably one of the most successful groups. If a bowls club that are traditionally maybe a slightly older generation, maybe you would assume that they're not as kind of digitally savvy, can put a good little video out there and have a successful crowdfunding campaign, I'd say anybody can. So the idea behind them is, you can film them on a phone. They just need to be a quick kind of face to camera video. Just need to explain who the organization is, what they're doing, so what they're doing with the money, why it matters, and then how people can help them to do that. So please share our project with your networks. So share the link. Please donate if you can. Please maybe claim one of our exciting rewards. Please fundraise for us if that's what they would like to do. Please offer us a reward if they're looking to actually bring in some of those rewards from the local community. So there's lots of different calls to action as well. And a shareable video that's really short, really concise, maybe has somebody who's maybe a larger than life character who's part of the organization that feels confident in front of the camera. It doesn't have to be the project owner. It can be somebody who just would really like to support the fundraising effort. If they can speak face to camera, that's brilliant. Just people connect with people. So it doesn't have to be a professionally shot corporate kind of website type video with, drone footage and amazing graphics and a backing track. It can just be phone, ideally kind of in situ, so at the venue if there is one, or maybe with something happening in the background, which kind of showcases a bit more about the project. And just making sure there's not a huge amount of background noise. It should be quite a simple exercise and actually quite fun once it's embraced. Okay, so the next one, I'll lose all of my donations if I don't hit my target. So this is a question that does come up a lot. And I think with crowdfunding, there is the idea that you set your target, and if you don't hit that, you're going to walk away with nothing. And that can be terrifying, more so probably than being declined for a grant, because actually you've not gone, it's not anybody else's money. You've not kind of taken money from people and then actually you're not going to be able to do it and you have to kind of refund it. So I understand why people would be scared about that. However, it's actually completely in the hands of the project owner. So there are two different ways that people can raise money on Crowdfunder. One is to choose to be all or nothing, which is if you don't hit your target, you don't receive your funds, and Crowdfunder will refund everybody from our side. So you don't have to, or you don't, the project owner doesn't have to do any of that admin. And the reason why that could work for some people is actually if you have a particular piece of equipment or the project delivery is going to cost X amount of money, and actually anything short of that means you just can't run the project or you can't buy that piece of equipment, and therefore you've got people's money, but you're unable to spend it in the way that you said you were going to. You might actually opt for all or nothing, because then it takes that kind of admin headache away from you of refunding people. It could also be that actually it can drive a good sense of urgency. So it might light a fire under the organization and also your supporters to make sure that you're hitting your target. Saying that, if people can make use of any amount of money they raise, whether it be £5, whether it be £50,000, they might decide to be a keep what you raise project. So in that scenario, projects would keep all of the money raised from their crowd. And with that, we're actually seeing that that's more of a popular way to actually raise funds. So right now on Crowdfunder, 98% of our projects choose to keep what you raise. So actually there's not a risk of walking away with nothing. Obviously dependent on if you're able to bring in some donations in the first place, but whatever you raise, you're able to keep. Okay. With things that it might be that out there's a lot of people talking about the all or nothing mechanism of raising money. That is because we know that actually those projects do raise more, because often that urgency and that kind of level of if we don't hit the target, we're not going to get anything, that message does drive supporters to donate and make sure that those projects hit the finish line. However, it's whatever suits the project and whatever suits the organization. Okay, next myth. I can only crowdfund once. So organizations can crowdfund as many times as they need. They can choose to be something called always on, which enables them to, after their successful campaign, still receive donations. And that can be on forevermore. They can receive money going forward. They can also come back and crowdfund again. So they might decide to access another pot of match funding. They might decide to run some regular prize draws. So they can always come back and run future campaigns. And we've done some really lovely work with our recent webinars about how to actually set up kind of a 12-month strategy where you're incorporating crowdfunding throughout the course of the year in different formats so that you are raising money overall over the course of a year. And we worked with 50K or £50,000 as being that kind of figure, but also doing that in a way that doesn't generate supporter fatigue. So doing things in different ways and utilizing the different elements of the platform means that when people are going back out to their supporter network, they're going back with something new and exciting rather than the kind of same message each time. Again, I have to offer rewards, and this is something that comes up time and time again. We are a rewards-based crowdfunding platform, so we have the ability for people to give something back to their supporters in return for their financial contribution. We'll look at rewards a little bit further in the session, but what we're really talking about there is things like products, merchandise, services, experiences. We're not talking about shares. We're not talking about capital. We're actually talking about things that supporters might like to essentially buy, in inverted commas, at a discounted rate from that crowdfunding campaign. So, of course, you don't have to offer rewards, and many projects don't, and they are based purely on donations alone, crowdfunding. But you'll see there some of the numbers as to what difference that the listing rewards can have. So projects that have donations only raise on average just under £1,000. Projects with rewards raise on average just over £3,500. So I say just over three and a half, 3,700. So it's a nearly 290% more. Those rewards don't have to be labour intensive. They don't have to be incredibly complicated. They just need to have a connection with their potential audience and potential crowd. So we'll look at what type of things those could be, but it gives people an additional reason to give because they feel like they're getting something back for their money, which I know we want people to give from the goodness of their hearts, but actually, if you're incentivizing that giving, it's going to make that a little bit easier for them, especially if it's something that they would love to have anyway. So that's why when we encourage people to reach out to their networks and local business community, we are encouraging people to source rewards that would actually be of interest to their local community at large. So, if I go and get a high street, maybe I go and get a restaurant voucher, maybe a meal for two. The local restaurant has decided they can gift me to put on my crowdfunding campaign. Maybe the value of that is, let's say, £50. If I list that on my crowdfunding campaign as a reward at £40, that supporter who claims it has just saved themselves £10 on their evening out. I'm going to shout about the wonderful restaurant that's actually supported our crowdfunder with their voucher. We will also encourage that restaurant to share our crowdfunding campaign with their network, so their customers, because actually their customer base are going to be the ones that might want to get their hands on that discounted voucher. So again, that community, that collaboration, the kind of, lifting everybody up at the same time, which is a really pivotal part of a successful campaign, can be really, really useful for different organizations as well. So looking at rewards then, this is just a bit of a snapshot of a couple of different things that people have offered from, it was a golf club that were looking to pop solar panels on their clubhouse, I believe, and they raised £54,000 in the end. Their target was 30, so they actually smashed their target and raised an additional £14,000. They had things like their memberships, so they would have like a pre-sale, if you like, of memberships for the following year. Some organizations or clubs will actually have a finite amount of discounted memberships that they might list on there. They also had different things like a seat at the top table with a particular, oh, I can't move myself out of the way here, with an event that they were hosting. But you'll see that when it comes to projects that have rewards, this is in the sports sector, you can typically see the amount pledged raise up to 30%. So actually, it boosts the amount that people are pledging by 30%. So actually, it can be really, really, really useful for campaigns within this sector. We're also going to look at extra funding. And for some of our extra funding partners, not all of them, but some of them do require you to either fund in a specific way. So you might need to hit 100% of that target in order to secure their pledges. It also might require them to potentially add rewards. Not always, but it can do. With extra funding, it's a really great way for organizations to potentially boost the amount of money that they're raising. So it could be that actually for every pound that a supporter is donating, that's matched by another pound. So it can really kind of either double, sometimes triple the amount that people are raising, depending on the funds that they're able to access. Predominantly at the moment, funding is available on our platform for charities, community projects, um, not-for-profit organisations, although I like to refer to them as profit with purpose organisations. So that's your social enterprises, that's your CIOs, all those type of things. So to find out more, you can check out the extra funding page, and that lists all of our current live funds. And we will make sure we share that link with everybody as part of the follow-up email. We talked earlier about how that works in action. So this is just a snapshot of the kind of matchmaking service that I mentioned. So when a project owner is creating their campaign page, they would need to set up a Crowdfunder UK account with us, and that is a completely free to access account. They can set that up. They can kind of dip in and out of drafting a campaign. They can come back to it. They can leave it until it's ready to go live. They're in complete control of it. They will be asked a few nominal questions about the crowdfunder, the extra funding, and it's a tick box exercise. That information combined with where they are in the UK, their organisational structure, that will actually help us to match them with relevant funding partners. And they'll be able to fill in those applications, and they'll also be able to apply for any of the funds that they think they could be eligible for. And just to highlight for those of you that might be thinking about, we've got some projects that are a perfect fit for Sport England Movement Fund. This is just a brief overview of the fund. So eligible projects can receive up to £15,000 towards their project, which is up to a 50% of their initial target. There are a few different routes to apply. They can set up a crowdfunding campaign and apply through us. They can also contact Sport England directly and apply through them. And the chances are they will then be kind of signposted to crowdfund so that they can access the fund as part of a match funding opportunity. Again, an overview of some of the other partners that we work with across the country. You'll see there are a mix of different corporates, different national organisations, and also we've got some local authorities thrown in there as well. Okay, we're going to take probably not the full 5 minutes. Let's just take a couple of moments to actually have a look at those different opportunities around you. I'm conscious of time. So what we'll do is I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so why do people pledge? Well, it's one of these two things. Sometimes it's a combination of these. They either believe in the idea, so they could be a beneficiary, they could be somebody to do with the organization or the club, and they know the benefit of raising the money and what that's going to do for the community or for the sport or physical activity. Alternatively, they may be there to get their hands on one of those rewards that we discussed. So that might be that wider community who don't have a direct link with the organization. And there's that sweet spot in the middle where actually those two things overlap. So that's going to be, people that are closer to the project, but also there's something in that rewards list that actually is appealing to them as well. This is a really important slide. This is something that comes up a lot when we're talking to project owners. They're concerned or they're overwhelmed as to how to actually connect with their crowd. And the way to do that is to take the community at large and to break it down into bite-sized pieces, much like those targets we talked about, having achievable milestones or achievable kind of areas, smaller segments to be able to focus on is going to be a lot easier, a lot less overwhelming than trying to just kind of scattergun promotion and hope that it lands well. So segmenting audiences, so splitting the crowd into kind of subsections or smaller groups, such as friends and family, local media, businesses, etc. You can see here on the slide some of the potential groups. Varying that communication. So actually thinking about how will I reach out to each of those groups? It's not going to be the same. I might pick up the phone and speak to a friend or a family member. I probably wouldn't send them a newsletter if that's not how I would communicate with them normally. In terms of local businesses, I might pop in and speak to them in person. I might curate a really nice email and try and find out the personal contact from that business and send that out and make sure it's personable. With all of the content that I'm creating or the promotion that I'm doing. How people tell their story really doesn't matter. So, what message is going to resonate best with each of those groups? Again, local businesses, I might be asking for them to put a flyer up. I might be asking to have a reward from them. And that message might be, we're doing this thing over here. We'd love to feature you as a local business. We'd like to be able to, combine our two audiences. And would you be able to gift us a reward? And we'll shout about you and we'll promote you. And hopefully we can work together. Whereas your members or beneficiaries, it might be about the rewards that are on offer. It might be about the impact that that project's going to have to them directly, especially if it's improving their experience. And then keeping supporters in the loop. So people are on that journey with those projects and making sure they're actually keeping in touch with them regularly. A great way to do that and to keep on top of all of that kind of promotion and admin is to maybe have a spreadsheet or something similar where they can have a list of their different audiences, how they're going to connect with them, so their method, and then maybe a status update as to how they've actually connected with them or how they plan to. And you can just see an example of that here. Now, everybody can help, and this is something which is a great message for you to impart on those potential project owners. They don't have to do this on their own. Some people do, but I would always recommend, if possible, that they look to fellow volunteers, colleagues, members, anybody, friends and family, anybody that can support them in building their community. So making donations, offering rewards, sharing the project, and maybe there's a way to find a crowdfunding champion, maybe that person who's always the loudest on social media but also you have respect for that you would like to kind of champion the message, or somebody who can kind of take that message out into different networks, which is difficult for the project itself. And then behind the scenes, having people who could help put the page together, that might be able to get that video sorted, that might be able to help with images or curating the page. Somebody who is good at social media. It doesn't have to all fall to one person. And then obviously networking, whether that's face to face or online. So everybody has that potential to play, and actually having those conversations early when it's even a seed of an idea of raising funds in that way is going to be really beneficial. It's going to allow this to be that kind of collaborative approach. It's going to feel less overwhelming. And it also means that all of those kind of ducks are in a row before the project goes live, and they're able to just be reactive to what's happening rather than feeling like they have to think on their feet the whole time. So this is where you come in. So how can you help them do this? Primarily, it's going to come down to kind of signposting. We will make sure that you've got the resources and access to the different, web pages and things that we offer, like our events. So you can signpost people to us and we can then offer support, imparting your knowledge. So again, coming along to our sessions, we have specific sessions covering different areas of crowdfunding. The more you feel confident in your knowledge, the more you're going to be able to advise. If you yourselves as an organisation have any match funding opportunities or grants that you might have people within your sector accessing, we can always have conversations about how we could maybe work together to distribute that, to actually amplify the amount that these clubs are raising or organisations are raising through having it as a match fund potentially rather than a pure grant. And then, of course, supporting projects in terms of if they're having a bit of a wobble and maybe they've hit a low patch and, donations haven't come in for a few days or they've hit a bit of a bump or, barrier, then being a listening ear is good, giving them that bit of pep talk to kind of go, have you tried doing this or reach out to these people over here? They might just need somebody to kind of, or to feel as if somebody's holding their hand throughout this. We will do that too, but for you will have that direct contact with them. And then you might have the ability to actually share what they're doing within your network. So on your channels or within your newsletter, if you are, representative of that sector. Things that we would recommend that you don't do to help. So try not to create that project page for them. They will know their organization best. They will be the ones that can showcase that personality and transparency on that page. Don't do all the marketing for them. Of course, reshare things, put your slant on it, try and get it into your networks. But the more the project owners put into this themselves, the more rewarding the process will be for them and the more of those benefits that they will see. Please don't promise that they'll get funded, or accept any responsibility if they don't get funded. It very much falls to the project owners and the targets that they're setting, their ability to bring in those donations from their community. You'll be able to advise them and signpost them. We can support them as well as you, but try not to make any promises that, yeah, if you just do a crowdfunder, Sport England will support you. You're a shoe in for this fund, or it'll be, it'll all be fine. It will potentially be, but we don't want you kind of taking on that responsibility. And then assisting with that campaign delivery post funding. So, again, what we're trying to do is empower organisations and clubs to really embrace this form of fundraising so that they can integrate it into their fundraising strategies. And if we're doing all of the work for them, we're almost robbing them of that experience and learning those skills. Saying that, there's a huge amount of support available to not only the clubs but also yourselves. Feel free to come along to any of these sessions. So we have things like webinars aimed at project owners. We have things like Ask the Expert drop-in sessions where people can come along and ask any questions. And we have lots of advice and resources on our website for them to engage with as well in their own time. Okay, I've flown through that. I'm very conscious that I kind of did fly through that section. So please do pop any questions in the chat or pop a hand up and I will field any questions that you have about today's session or your particular involvement with any clubs or organisations. We've had a few people that have had to drop off, unfortunately, but do we have any questions that anyone would like to ask? No? Okay, what I will do is, oh, brilliant. Can you draw down partial funds in advance of the campaign ending? So, any minimum target met, and would match funding affect this? Okay, that's a great question, Steve. So, yes, we have actually rolled out this kind of new function so people can receive payouts before their project, before their campaign. I'm going to call it a campaign because it makes a bit more sense before their campaign ends. So, with that, the project does need to be live for 7 days before they can receive their first payout. And in terms of match funding, let's say that they were approved for the Sport England Movement Fund. With that particular fund, they have to hit 100% of their target to secure the match funding pledge from Sport England. However, anything that they had raised from their crowd would be theirs to keep if they were a Keep What You Raise project, for example. So, as long as you're Keep What You Raise, you can start drawing down any money that you've raised from your crowd after being live for 7 days. And that can be a really nice way for people to actually access some of that funding again in a really short time frame and get the ball rolling with certain things that they would like to as part of that project. When it comes to match funding, there will be T's and C's for each of those different funds. So yes, some of them they would only be able to draw down if they were considered successful. So they've hit 100% of their target, for example, with Sport England. Other funds work in slightly different ways, but ultimately crowd money they can definitely draw down after 7 days of being live. So I hope that that helps with that one. Any other questions? Fab. Okay. What we will do is we will wrap it up for today. When we send a follow-up email, we'll make sure that we also include invitations to things like our Ask the Expert sessions. So if you have any follow-up questions, please do feel free to join one of those. If you are working with any projects, please do make sure that you are sharing those invitations with them as well. So our general events page will have all of those listed, and we can answer any questions on behalf of yourself or those clubs at any point, and to engage with us as well. So following us on our socials, connecting with either our partnership team if there's funds that you might want to explore with distribution through ourselves, or alternatively our support team who can triage any of your questions to the relevant team member. All that remains to say is thank you so much for joining me today and spending an hour and a half of your time with me. It was very kind of you to spend your lunchtime with me. I hope you get a chance to go and grab a cup of tea and maybe a bite to eat. And we will hopefully connect with you all soon again in the future. And good luck supporting projects or running those projects for your own ideas and your own clubs or organisations too. Okay, thank you very much. Take care.